Trump's doctrine of peace. A warm welcome to everyone. If you don't mind my saying so, the dumbest thing I have heard in a very, very long time, and I have lived long enough, is Trump's theory of peace. Fortunately, he phrases everything in a very simple and direct manner, which I appreciate and I feel grateful to him for that. And therefore, it's very easy to name or allude to his doctrine of peace. It's very simple. Peace with power, with the proviso that power comes first, power comes before peace, and therefore, by implication, Trump's peace will spring only out of power. So, this is precisely what it is. Easy to remember. Power comes out of peace. Oh, peace comes out of power, sorry. Power, peace with power. So, peace will come out of, peace will spring from, peace will emerge from power. So, power is a primary fact, peace is the byproduct. This is the essence of Trump's doctrine of peace. What sense are we to make of this? And that's our inquiry in this present video. Now, first of all, there are two completely different approaches to peace, just as there are two complete ideas of peace or understanding of peace. Now, first, let us very quickly reckon the two different understanding of peace. The first understanding of peace is, and that's the understanding of peace that Trump subscribes to, that peace is the mere absence of conflict or war. If there is no war, if there is no bloodshed, if there is no conflict, then peace prevails. The other understanding of peace is completely different. It says, or it means, or it insists, that the mere absence of violence or war or conflict does not mean peace. Peace is the condition that must be created in order to ensure the all-round development and fulfillment of the human species. So it's a very positive concept. The first is negative, the second is positive. Now, a great deal needs to be said about both, but if I go into that, I'll lose my control over time. Now, correspondingly, there are two completely different approaches to power. The first is Trump's idea of power, namely, or Trump's idea of how power is to be secured. You increase your muscle power and then you create peace. So, power becomes the source and the guarantor of peace. In the second idea of peace, power has nothing to do with peace. Peace results from a certain quality of the human being, and therefore the only viable strategy to create peace in this world is by improving, by refining, by ennobling human nature. So from this perspective, peace is the byproduct of human regeneration and enlightenment. This is a spiritual idea of peace. Now, of course, the modern world people will laugh at me when I say that there is a spiritual idea of peace. And surprisingly, even in India, though India is really the very source of this idea, the spiritual idea of peace. And that's why we have meditation, etc., etc. So from the Eastern point of view, peace is a spiritual thing. From the Western point of view, peace is a function of power. This is something that we have to grasp very clearly. I'm not saying that everyone in the West believes that peace is a function of power. I'm only saying that doctrinally, the view that Trump now articulates is not something that has originated in him. It's a kind of blind faith, as a superstitious faith or dogmatic faith that has influenced the Western civilization for a very long time, for the simple reason that the heart of the Western civilization was power. And this is easy to see if you regard the fact that the most powerful, most popular, most widespread myth in the Western culture is the Faustian myth, the myth of Faustus. And Faustus is someone who pursued power, who deemed the pursuit of power the greatest vocation in life. And Christopher Marlowe's play, Dr. Faustus, is a good examination of the double-edged dynamics of this power seeking. But again, this is not the occasion for me to take you into the literature pertaining to this aspect of the misunderstanding of power. So very clear, two understanding of power, therefore two attitudes to power. Now, what Trump advocates needs to be seen in perspective. That's why I provided a very sketchy, very brief introduction. So he is clearly located within a tradition that believes that peace can only be a function or a byproduct of power, and therefore the more powerful you become, the greater you are as a provider, creator, guarantor, and supervisor of peace. This idea of the good cop, the universal policeman that America has been for a while. Now, what is the truth about these assumptions? Look at history. Now, the interesting thing is, the moment you embrace power, you become insecure. So, historically speaking, the byproduct of power is not peace but insecurity. It's very easy to see today. If you ask me who are the most insecure people on earth, it is the people of the United States of America, because they are the most powerful. And the same thing is true about Russians. Russians cannot move around as freely as we can because they are very powerful. So wherever a people rely on power and use their power against others, they bring upon themselves the curse, the perennial curse of insecurity. So the idea that peace will naturally evolve out of power is the greatest mistake you can imagine. The only byproduct of power, or the foremost byproduct of power, is insecurity. And I don't have to argue that insecurity and peace do not go along well together. So that's the first thing I want to say. The second thing I want to argue is, as this is based on the observations made by Arnold Toynbee in his classic study, a study of history. I don't think there is a greater work in history which provides us a bird's eye view of all that has happened in the history of humankind by way of the study of civilizations, a study of history. One of the points that Arnold Toynbee makes is that when a people or a nation reposes its trust on power and gets carried away by the extent of power it can wield against others, it begins to acquire the expansionist and imperialistic impulse. If you are a powerful nation, you can really never stand confined within your boundaries. You must necessarily expand to areas, territories, regions, continents beyond your natural boundaries. Or you have a tendency to play the global policeman and you get involved in various skirmishes, regional conflicts, wars everywhere, as has been the case with America. And what happens? Either way, either because you want to go and conquer people at a distance and having conquered them, maintain them as part of your sprawling empire, or because you feel that you have to play the role of the global policeman and you get involved in various skirmishes here, there, and everywhere, you suffer a steady attrition of your economic resources and you begin to be weakened internally. The more you get, the more you stretch yourself. That's the word I think that Toynbee uses. The more you stretch yourself in order to play the global cop, and the more you involve yourself in the affairs of others, the weaker you become, financially, even culturally, the weaker you become internally. And a time comes when the whole thing snaps. And this is clearly seen in the case of the erstwhile USSR. The role that the USSR involvement in Afghanistan, where America actually trapped the USSR and America promoted Taliban and all that history, you know, I don't have to repeat it. So it was not merely in Afghanistan that the USSR was involved. It was involved in other regions. It was involved in propagating the USSR ideology. And a lot of money was invested in this propaganda work. And I happened to be exposed very early in life to the writings of Karl Marx because the USSR government was investing a lot of money in translating the Marxian literature and distributing at a subsidized cost to people in their mother tongues all over the world. So I happened to read the works of Karl Marx when I was a boy, translated into Malayalam by a very competent translator called C. Unniraja. Of course, I didn't understand the subtler nuances of Marxian thought, but I could boast of the fact that I could read, or I have read, the works of Marx in translation without understanding what Marx was trying to say. So the point I'm making is that USSR spread or tried to spread all over because it was inherent in the Marxian ideology. The imperialistic impulse was innate in Marxian ideology. Therefore, it had to spread all over. And the more you try to spread around, the more incapable you become to sustain that effort, and the very strain of it makes you break internally. So this is a theory. So rather than history allowing you to entertain the hypothesis that peace emerges from power, the lesson of history is that power breeds insecurity. Today, you think of Americans. Because America had the power, the technology, the instruments of destruction, B-2 bombers, the most destructive bomb, the what's called bunker buster bomb, each weighing 30,000 pounds, etc., and that was shown off. As a result, the insecurity of every American has intensified tenfold. So that is a fact of history. But all this is masked, and in a blithe and bland manner, a doctrine is propounded that peace will come out of power. So please understand that this runs counter to the logic of history. Peace has never emerged. True peace, I'll come to that in a short while. Peace has never emerged from power. Slavery, suppression, the domination of one people by another, one country by another, the exploitation of one country by another, the ruination or the denial of freedom and opportunities to one people by another, all these things have come out of power. There's no doubt about it. But peace, as peace, has never come out of power, and this is something that we have to be very clear about. Now, for a moment, pardon me. Let us look at what has happened in history. There is a theory, or there is a kind of minor school of opinion, that Alexander the Great conquered the whole of the then known world. We can't say that Alexander conquered the whole world because the knowledge about the world was not complete. So it may be somewhat accurate to say that Alexander the Great conquered the then known world. But why did Alexander do so? Well, the dominant interpretation is that he did so in order to show his power, his glory, etc. But it's also argued that he did so in order to ensure the safety and the security of his small kingdom, Macedonia. So if you want your people, your country to be safe, what's the thing you need to do? Conquer the whole world. Now, is that a valid idea of peace? The basic norm in peace is that if you are at peace, your neighbor is also entitled to be at peace. If you ruin the peace of your neighbor, then you are not entitled to peace yourself. So, now in order to understand this, we must understand the concept of peace itself, and I'll come to that's the last thing I want to explain, then I'll stop. Now, unfortunately, at the level of popular thinking, there's a lot of confusion about what peace means, even literally. Sometimes, in order to think, not sometimes, but almost always, in order to think clearly, we must understand the meaning of the words that we use. What is the meaning of the word peace? Now, in order to understand this, I'll refer you to a very interesting small book. This book, the author of the book is Hannah Arendt, Hannah Arendt, Arendt. The title of that book is On Violence. Now, in that book, if I remember its substance clearly, the author makes a distinction between certain words: power, violence, force, strength. Power, power, strength, force, violence. I think that's the sequence in which she deals with these words. Now, she points out, and quite rightly too, that power comes from the people. Power can be derived only from the people. For example, the power of a government comes only because the people endorse that government. So, the source of power is people. And this is very important to remember. Now, take the other word, strength. Strength is a characteristic of individuals. For example, we talk about the strength of character. A strong-willed person, a strong person. Take the next word, force. She says force is accurately attributed to elemental forces like thunder, lightning, water, and force. Then comes the last word, violence. She says, and very rightly she says, violence is related to technology. If you look at the history of warfare, you will find that the scale on which violence has been practiced depends directly on the nature of the technology employed in warfare. Today, unprecedented levels of violence can be practiced because technology as applicable to warfare has improved almost in a mind-boggling manner. Now think of the Midnight Hammer operation launched by America against the 3 nuclear sites in Iran. Bombers take off from America. They fly 18 hours and then drop bombs, each weighing 30,000 pounds. And 12 such bombs were dropped on one site, which means 360,000 pounds of ammunition. Not all of that is explosive, but the total weight dropped on one site. Now, what is it that makes such violence possible? Only the sophistication in technology. Therefore, what Trump is talking about is not power. If he had any grounding in the semantics of the English language, true meaning of words, he would have said peace with violence. What he is dealing with is not power, but violence. Why? Because even in America, there is a debate, a serious debate, which would today blow up in the American Congress, that Donald J. Trump did not have the authorization from the Congress to undertake this military operation. In other words, he didn't have the power to do so. He had all the violence that was required, but he didn't have the power to do so. And this issue is going to be debated just today. This is Monday, Monday the 23rd of June. So, let's be clear that Trump's doctrine of peace has nothing to do with power. It has everything to do with violence. So what is happening today is the clash between one school of violence against another, or one nucleus of violence against another. It is American violence versus Iranian violence. It's Israeli versus violence, Iranian violence. And believe you me, no peace will come out of it. What will come out of it, the best perhaps that can come out of it, is that one form of violence or one nucleus of violence, the most powerful nucleus of violence, may succeed in subjugating the smaller of the nucleus of violence, and therefore neutralize it only for a while. It can never be a permanent arrangement. So there may be a temporary, if at all this operation succeeds, which is extremely unlikely, at the very least it's very doubtful. If at all this stratagem works to an extent, all that we can hope for, the best we can hope for, is a temporary lull. And the soonest the wounded Iran can muster up some courage and some resources and work out a strategy, it will attack. It will attack both Israel and America to the extent it can. And therefore, we have to look forward to violence, mutually inflicted violence, becoming chronic and endemic in this region. So Trump's idea that he has made a significant contribution to peace through the quote-unquote power that he wields, he has no power, he has only violence, is the dumbest, most stupid thing I've heard in a long while. And perhaps Donald Trump propagates this doctrine because he has his eyes on the Nobel Prize for Peace. So what will happen is, if Trump lobbies hard and he wins Nobel Prize for Peace, Nobel Prize for Peace will be corrupted into Nobel Prize for Violence. Believe you me, what Trump is propagating is not peace, it is violence. And his dogmatic assumption that peace in the world can be secured through violence is the most dangerous dogma, the dangerous doctrine imaginable. It is necessary, therefore, it's a moral duty, the intellectual duty of every well-meaning person to call this out. That's the reason why I cannot but do this video. Let's think clearly. What we need today is clarity. Mao Zedong was the one who originated the concept that power comes out of the barrel of a gun. Now that itself is utterly wrong. But it became extremely popular because people didn't have the semantic sensitivity to understand the contradiction. What comes out of the barrel of a gun is not power but violence. So, from Mao Zedong, we have now reached Trump. So, power comes out of the barrel of a gun, that's Mao Zedong. Peace comes out of power, that is Trump. So, ipso facto, peace comes out of power, which comes out of the barrel of a gun. Can you accept that doctrine? If you can, a big salute. I cannot. This is an insult to humanity to endorse this theory. But to my great shock, utter surprise, not a word of dissent has so far been expressed on doctrinal and intellectual levels regarding this dumbest theory that there can be peace because there is power. First of all, this is not power, this is violence. Violence will breed violence. That's what Jesus said, put down the sword. He who takes a sword shall perish by it, because it's a historical fact that violence will breed violence. There's no question about it. And it's right and proper that it does so. This is the reason why, in one of the videos I have already shared with you, a Christian perspective on war and violence, I say, or I said in that video, that as a Christian thinker, I find it difficult to be partial to any one of the two combatants or the pugilists, the fighters, because for me, both are situated on the same ideological foundation, the same dogmatic doctrinal hypothesis that peace can come out of power. It never can, it never has, it never will. Only more destruction, more misery, more violence will emerge from it. And therefore, sensible people should have the guts to come out and say that this is Bangam, this is not the way to peace, this is the way to self destruction. Thank you. All the very best.